Hello, everybody. This is Jay Delvecchio, and I am proud to introduce Carrie Lewis, who works with us out there at our University of Richmond classes for the Certified Personal Trainer, amongst other things. You may have had an experience with her on her nutritional class that we have on our workshops in our store. But I thought this would be a great topic, and she is a great one to lead it. So, all you, Carrie. The group
Okay,
wait.
great. All right, good afternoon. Hopefully everybody can see where I am. My the camera on the GoToWebinar is small, so I can kind of see where I am. But I'm on my iPad, so it's a little bit better set up as far as camera-wise. And then I've also got my microphone on, so it'd be a little bit easier for you to hear me. We do have a very large dog who you may hear bark. He's in the back. And then there may be a train of cats that come in and out of this door. So if you see one shoot through here, they do belong to me. This is the way they go out. So usually when I'm teaching classes, it's a combination of cats going in and out or the dog being out here or something like that. So I'm going to keep the dog out because he's rather large and he's just going to be in my way. So like Jay said, I've actually been teaching with these guys for quite some time now. I mostly teach at the University of Richmond, where they have the on-site personal training workshops and personal trainer certifications. I also work for the University of Richmond as a trainer, and then also as a group exercise instructor. I've been working for the University of Richmond for well over a decade now, which actually blows my mind. It's been quite that long. Really great facility. So if you ever have a chance to come to Richmond, you ever have a chance to tour the Weinstein Center at University of Richmond, it's beautiful. VCU also has an absolutely gorgeous fitness and sports center. And so that's where you get the VCU Rams, if anybody's into basketball. I have a couple clients who are like heavy duty in the basketball, so I know all about it. But both centers are absolutely gorgeous university centers, and we have a ton of equipment in there. But the interesting thing about equipment is you honestly don't need a whole lot of equipment to make a really good workout, okay? This personally in this room here is my home gym. We also have clients that come into this gym as well, and we don't have any large pieces of equipment. So we have a Precor trainer here. And then we have bikes over here that we will cycle on in place, but we don't have any large pieces of equipment. So everything that we're utilizing within this space right here is pretty much anything that'll travel. So we've got the TRX, we've got the Bosu trainers, which I'm going to show you a little bit of today with the kettlebells. I've also got a Reebok balance board that's over here that I'm going to utilize for an RDL along with our kettlebells. And so I encourage you, when you're working with your clients, you don't need the big fancy stuff. You can have a few pieces of equipment and really do a bang up job of training somebody. Again, we have everything is really mobile because in my business, what we do is we actually take equipment out of this facility or this room in here, and we take it to clients and we train them at their job, we train them at their home. So we have to be very mobile with all of our equipment, and we have to have a lot of stuff that we can pretty much work everything with, okay? Kettlebells are actually one of the excellent ways to do that, okay? Before we get into that, so I think Jay wanted me to give you just a little bit of my background. So I have been a trainer since 1998, quite some time. I went to school for exercise sciences, and that is my base degree. I'm currently getting an additional degree in clinical nutrition. So a lot of stuff going on, but the exercise science degree is super helpful. And then I also have my, again, personal training certification via a couple different entities. It was AFA. Now they've renamed themselves. It was the Aerobics and Fitness Association of America, and they've revamped that a little bit. And then everybody's falling under an umbrella, including WITS. So everybody's coming under this nice educational umbrella, which is good because trainers really do need to have some type of hierarchy in that training, and it all needs to come from one spot and then kind of trickle its way down. There were too many little things all over the place. And sometimes a 3-day workshop to become a personal trainer is really a rough go. So the programming, the reason I started actually teaching for WITS is the programming is so extraordinary. It's drawn out, which is fantastic. You've got this book that is super awesome. You have all these practicals that you have to do. You have all these lectures that you have to do. And so the drawn out programming is what drew me to teaching for WITS because of the fact that it is so drawn out. It wasn't just a 3-day, show up one day, take your exam, take your practical, ooh, boom, you're a personal trainer, you know. I just like the way it's all drawn out, and I like the amount of information. And it is a lot of information. So for the ones of you that have become certified, it's a lot of information, okay? However, though, over time, you really do kind of learn in the field in particular, okay? And from seminars and things of that nature. And of course, I'm not by far the #1 trainer that's out there. Do pretty good at what I do. I like what I do, and that's important. You should like what you do because that's super important. But you also have to think about when you're training, you have to think about the people that you're training, the actual groups of people and or person that you're training. So if you're training like for a class, for example, that's a different dynamic than one-on-one. You know, when you're training in a class, you may have all these different things you want that class to do, but not everybody's going to be able to do every single thing that you want to do. When you're training one-on-one, you're going to learn what that person cannot do and what they can do, and then what you might be able to get them to do if you correct their form and you build their strength and things like that. So it's a very different dynamic when you're in a group versus when you're one-on-one. But if you're a trainer, it is important to know how to work in both because you certainly can do really well with small training groups or classes, and then good one-on-one as well, okay? So what we're here to talk to, or what I'm here to talk to you today about, basically are kettlebells. And kettlebells have been around for quite some time. Some history books will say that they began way back in Greece, many centuries ago, and that they were training with those kettlebells, and they still train up to them today. A lot of the recent history we'll find is they started somewhere in, I believe it was the 1700s, 1600s in Russia. And what the original kettlebells were is they were just basically a mass of metal with a handle on the end. So when you're looking at your kettlebell, I mean, this is a really small one, but these are super fancy, right? So they're really nicely made. They have a really nice grip on them. The old school ones were not anywhere near this. They just look like a big hunk of metal with a handle. The purpose of these particular things, they have different purposes in different places. So a lot of these were used to weigh out grain at markets. They would use the different weights to weigh out grain at market. Some of them were used on farms where they would weigh down certain things that were covering, like a bale of hay, for example. And these bells would weigh things down, or they would weigh down rope for whatever. And then what happened is some of the farmers and the farm hands just got kind of bored not having anything to do. So they started picking up these kettlebells, which is not what they were called at the time, and they just started tossing them around and just practicing with them and just doing different things. And they found that they got a really good workout and they got stronger. And then fast forward quite some time, a exercise sports science doctor many moon ago said we should really make these an exercise. We should utilize these. And I don't know what the demographic is that's on the call, but I was born in the 70s, so at that time, gyms were not a thing. They were around, but they weren't like they are now. You'd have the heavy lifting gyms where it was just barbells and, you know, dust and grit and plates and lots of people grunting and moaning and whatever. And then you have now the fancy gyms, right? In the regular old gyms that were around when I was coming up, these didn't exist. They weren't in the gym. They are now today, because we're finding again that pieces of equipment that we used many moon ago, or things coming out of physical therapy, they're really great. We can use them out in the community, but the question is always, are we using them correctly? Those are some of the big questions we have to ask. And of course, when you're training either a class, you're training a group, we have to think about several different questions. Okay, so I know that hopefully you've got a pen and paper. Maybe you can jot a couple of these questions down. Okay, so the first thing we have to think about when we're training either a group or a person what's the purpose of the exercise that we're doing? That's number one thing that we always need to ask ourselves. What's the purpose of this exercise? What are we trying to accomplish with this particular exercise? Because unfortunately, you see a lot of really cool exercises out there. You'll get on YouTube or TikTok. I've seen some really disturbing stuff on both platforms, TikTok in particular, where you'll have these influencers that will do these crazy things, and they're really not appropriate for most people. So you got to think about, again, what is the exercise actually doing for me, number one? Or what am I trying to do with this exercise, okay? The second thing that you really do want to think about with that exercise is it safe, okay? And how do I put this? Every exercise, 99.9% of the time has a purpose, right? But the question is it an appropriately safe exercise for whomever you're training, okay? So would I do the same thing with my 85-year-old client, okay, that I would do with my 25-year-old client? No. I hope your answer was no. Because if it wasn't, we got to go back and reevaluate our exercise, okay? So what I do with my 85-year-old client is not going to be nearly what I'm going to be able to do with my 25-year-old client, okay? So again, first off, we're thinking about the exercise in general. What are we trying to do? Secondly, we're thinking about, is it a safe exercise? And is it appropriate for the person that I'm getting ready to train? I can do it, but can this person do it? And there's a lot of things you have to weigh about that, okay? The next thing you want to think about is, are there any joints that are being compromised, okay? Particularly your back, all right? I see so many people do things incorrectly that I know that their back, I realize some of these people are very young and their back is also very young and supports them in some of the things that they do. But I see some form that just drives me up the wall. And sometimes I just can't stand it. I have to correct it, okay? Because 20 years down the line, do you want to have a back problem? No, right? Do we need to strengthen our back? Absolutely. There are safe ways to do that. Some exercises are just, again, not appropriate for every single person, okay? Another thing that you want to think about when you're putting your exercises together for your person is, are they in the order that I want them to go? Okay, are they beneficial in the order that I want them to go? And what's the purpose for our client? Like, are they strength training? Are they powerlifting? Are they endurance training? I mean, what is the purpose? Because that's going to help me pick, number one, how I want to structure my plan, my exercise plan. But number two, it's also going to help me pick a kettlebell size for my client, okay? And it'll also help me decide how many repetitions and how many sets I want to do, depending on what the client's goals are, okay? So those are some things to think about when you're actually designing your program, okay? And then the question is going to be, what is the level of fitness of your client or small group or what have you? Like, have they ever exercised before? If not, kettlebells are probably not where I'd start if I were you. But again, like I told you, we take everything in-home, so I don't have any machines. The best place to start with a person who's really never done any kind of lifting is going to be on a secure machine where you can really control their entire posture. But I don't have that luxury because I don't really have machines. But I can use body weight, which is a great way to control, okay? And you should learn really how to move your own body weight properly before you give anybody weights. Because if you hand somebody weights and their form is off, you're just going to increase the odds that they get injured, okay? So you have to think about all those things, all right? So again, picking out an appropriate weight for whatever you're going to be doing is going to be incredibly important. And I know people will look at kettlebells and they're massive, they're huge, but there are lots of different sizes. So again, very important that you pick out an appropriate kettlebell. And not every kettlebell is going to be appropriate for every single exercise that you're going to do, okay? What exercises can you do with kettlebells? Well, you can do pretty much anything. I mean, you do a ton of stuff. There are very specific exercises like the Turkish get up that you can do with kettlebells. It's not a super advanced exercise, but it's one that if you've got, again, an older population, probably not the ones that you really need to learn as far as, that. But what you do need to learn is some of the balance exercises that you can utilize kettlebells with. because that's super important to keep the hips strong and keep people in good balance. And you can do all of that with kettlebells very easily. Okay? All right, so if you have access to kettlebells, or if you have weights, or if you have something, you can kind of follow along with me if you want to. We're just going to go over basically the safety of the entire situation. I wrote down some exercises that I use all the time, but I also wrote down some ways to progress those exercises because I think it's important, of course, that you know the base and then you kind of can progress from there, okay? So anytime normally that you start working with somebody with kettlebells, it's usually a one kettlebell situation, so they get used to using it and picking it up, okay? Remember, whenever you go to pick up something, a weight or what have you, that you're going to hinge at the hips, keep the back in alignment, pick that kettlebell up. And if you're going to swing, which swings are probably, I mean, they're one of the best exercises that you can do with your kettlebell. It's just a base kettlebell swing. But everybody knows those exercises, right? So if you're going to swing it, I like to one arm swing personally. Again, it's going to make a difference to whether your person has ever touched a kettlebell or a piece of equipment or not, to how you're going to proceed, okay? So if you're going to do a two-arm swing, a lot of times what they like you to have is the two arms front on the kettlebell. Now, people will tell you, and I've heard it many times before, that there are certain ways to hold this kettlebell. Honestly, if you can get a good grip on it and you can hang on to it and it's comfortable for your client, and they're doing what you want them to do and they're not compromising anything, then it's fine, okay? So when you're doing your kettlebell swings, if you're gonna do them with one kettlebell, I'll have them do them with double hands. And remember that the swing is actually a hip thrust. So it's not where I see this all the time. I'll see people bend down and then they get all hunched over and then they'll swing and they'll bend down and they'll swing. And so that's an inappropriate form, okay? That puts a lot of stress on the back. So what we want to make sure that we do is we kick it up at the hip. So it's like a big thrust. Now, could you go down a little deeper? Yeah, if you got the range of motion, you certainly can. You just want to make sure that whenever you're in this position, bending forward, that you're not rounding at your back. Okay, we call that unsupported forward flexion. And then you're going to hand me a weight, and then you want me to do something with that weight. Okay, so important that we make sure that they're not hunched over and they're not just hanging by their spine, because that's pretty much what that is. All right. So if you're going to be doing a one-arm kettlebell swing, you actually can leave the kettlebell here. I like to swing it all the way and then turn it out at the top. So it'll come back down about mid in this position, down, swing and open it up, and then just past my head. Okay? And then you could switch sides. Or you could do that swing and switch in the middle of the swing if you want to. Again, it's going to depend on how much fitness, how fit the person is coming in. Have they ever done it before? Do they feel comfortable with it? You know, all of those kind of things, okay? So again, kettlebell swings, they are very, they're great cardio, they're very useful, they're a great exercise. Just don't pick up one that's like uber heavy until you've got the motion, all right? So a lot of times starting somebody out on a lighter kettlebell just to get the motion, or even not even a kettlebell at all, just the motion of doing it to make sure that they get in the right position is incredibly important, because safety should always be your number one thing. That should be always what you're looking for, is safety. And then a lot of times I'll be watching them like a hawk to make sure that they don't do something weird. Sometimes people do something weird because something hurts, but they don't notice they did it. And a lot of times I'll call it out. Sometimes just a small little temporary easy fix. Okay? So again, kettlebell swing.
Gary.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry to pop in. We had Marianne ask, can you demonstrate the switch?
I can demonstrate the switch. Happy to do that. So let me do that. Okay. So if I'm going to do my switch here, what I would normally do is I like to part my legs a little bit more. It gives me a little swing room. Then what I will do is come up and I'll just switch. Now, some people, which I like because it's hand-eye coordination, I'll toss it and I'll switch it. Okay? So you've got several different options of how you want to switch your belt. I like to toss. That's just me. Okay? Cool? All right, so again, how do we make that harder? Well, if we want to make that harder, then we add 2, right? Because we can still add 2. Now, I might go down, if I add 2, let's say that, see this? Right here is a 10. That's all it is. Normally, kettlebells, by the way, are measured in kg, but just to make it easier for my clients, mine are not. So it makes it super simple. All right, so here, if we're going to add 2, you might need to go down in weight because maybe 2 10s is not, you just can't do it. But you can do more than 10. So now I've got 16, okay? So my swings would be the same. And you can turn your hands. I like to turn mine up, but you can also turn them out if you want to. Okay? And then not have sweaty hands so that you're, normally I have gloves on and your hand will just like slide backwards. Okay? So that would be one way to make that more difficult. Okay? So another one I want to share with you, again, if you have the ability to do it, okay? I call them, we'll call them man makers. I've heard them called renegade rows as well. And depending, and I'm just going to relocate this real quick, because I don't need to write this second. Depending on you and your client, again, if your client can do a nice solid push-up, all right, this would be a great thing for them to go for, okay? So in a row or a renegade row, and you can combine this renegade with a push-up if you want to. So here, now you would want to put something, and I think I'm going to put, let me see, I'm going to put one of my 8s over here. All right, so you don't want to put your other hand on something, whatever that is, okay? And then when you're in your plank position, all you're going to do is row. Okay, now let's say that somebody's not like a full plank position, not good, don't like it, can't do it. That's fine. We can do on the knees. Okay, are you going to get that big of a row when you're on your knees? I mean, no, but it still can be done, right? Okay. So again, I'll hear that called either a man maker or a renegade row, depending on who you are. Now, let's say that neither one of those, like that position, it's great in that position because in a plank, what are you working in a plank? Is anybody unmuted and wants to tell me what you're working in a plank? I like to be interactive. What are we working when we're in a plank?
Core.
Core. Well, what's in the core? What?
Transverse
Tell me
abdominis.
what.
Transverse abdominis.
Rectus abdominis. What else?
Transverse abdominis. TA.
Transverse abdominis. What else?
The obliques. Internal,
The obliques.
external.
What else?
Multifidi.
What else?
We're everything, really, honestly. Shoulders, glutes, you name it, right?
Yeah, man. So in the core, your rectus spinae, right? Okay. Hips, all of them, right? Outer, inner, hip flexors, glutes, and then everything that takes you to hold a plank, right? Upper body, lower body, but a lot of core strength, right? Okay? So all of those things, if we can stay in that plank and do those rows, that's fantastic. But let's say that person just isn't strong enough for that, okay? And again, you can use a plain old dumbbell, right, to do a regular old row. So if you're in position, you can use a plain old dumbbell. And normally I would put somebody on a bench, but my bench is where my camera's sitting, so we can do it with a dumbbell, right? So if we're just trying to get a row out, here's our row. Just our plain old nice low row, okay? But now let's have a little fun with that row. Let's say now that we want to take our person just one step forward, okay? So now we're gonna ask them to balance, tip, and row, okay? Could I touch down first, then bring it up and give myself a row? Yeah, why not?
I'm muted.
Right? As long as I'm in alignment, right? Okay? Now, let's make it even harder. Bosu. Kettlebells. Foot in center. Balance. Lean. And row. Okay? When you are training somebody, what are some things that you're looking at while they're doing any of those activities that I just did?
Balance.
Huh?
Form.
Form, but what are we looking for in a form? Tell me some things that might be compromised that we don't want to compromise.
Low back, cervical.
Right, exactly. So the back. So if we've got somebody in that position and they're all hunched over because they can't do it, then we need to find something else for them to do, right? It's great core strength. I mean, if I stand on one leg, if I just stand here for the next 30 minutes on one leg, is it hard for me? No, not really. I mean, I can move myself around and wiggle and jiggle and put this leg back, but I do it all the time. The reason I do it is because I'm trying to work my hips. I stand on one foot and do a multitude of things because it's good for my hips and my balance, right? But if we have somebody that's completely out of alignment in this position, then that particular exercise is just not going to be a good one for them. But that one I started off with here is a brilliant one for them. They have support here or on a bench as long as the lower back is not out of alignment. And they're doing what I want them to do, and they're doing it with control. That's what I'm looking for, right? Okay. So that's always a good one and gives you a bunch of different ways to do it. So now let's talk about one more with the row.
Carrie, I got one for you real
Yes.
quick. A couple
Yep, go
things,
ahead.
the short ones here. This is from Catherine. What weight for an older fit beginner in pounds?
So what weight for an older
Fit
fit?
beginner. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So Catherine, thanks for that question. So it's going to depend on what exercise you're doing. Are we talking about the row in itself, or are we talking about the swings, or what exactly are we talking about? Because it does depend.
Yeah, that's a great one. And everybody, you are unmuted, so you can self-mute and unmute to ask the questions or dive in deeper so you can really get more out of this with Carrie.
Yeah, Catherine, what like exercise are we talking about that you're particularly curious about? Do I have Catherine?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like she's getting it right now. Well,
That's okay. Not a big deal. So I can kind of cover it as a broad topic. So every single time that you think about doing an exercise with somebody, less is always more. And what I mean by that is going for a lower weight first and making sure that, of course, you always demo the exercise. So don't ever not demo. It's bad. Unless you know that person absolutely knows it, you need to demo stuff, okay? When you demo stuff, make sure that you're demoing it, of course, properly, but also make sure that you're watching your client, that they do it properly with a light amount of weight to start with. So honestly, even if you have somebody with, if it's a guy or a girl, it doesn't matter. Because remember, even though chicks, we like to have that upper body strength, once we hit 40, it kind of starts to dive down a little bit. Not a lot. If you keep training, you're going to keep it up. But we also, the other thing too with females, we also just don't have that grip strength anymore. And that's unfortunate. So see, I can do a lot more weight than I can hold personally because I don't have the grip strength anymore. So a lot of times when I'm doing stuff, if I'm going to do something on my back, like a chest press, I can grip that. But if you want me to hold something together, sometimes I don't have the grip strength to do it. Or I can sit on a machine and push it where I can open up my hands, but I don't have the grip strength. So it depends on a lot of different factors, but always go less is more. So if you have somebody that is, again, fit in their 50s, I would start out with either like a 10 or a 12 or a 15-pound kettlebell, again, depending on what you're doing, and go from there with that. If it's too easy or they complete it with ease, or you notice they complete it with perfect form and ease, then you might consider going up on the weight with that. And the kettlebells, they go in a certain keel up, so they go, up by certain numbers. So it makes it easier for you to do the math with the repetitions and the sets and things, depending, of course, on what they're doing. If they're swinging, they might not be able to swing a 30-pound kettlebell, but they might be able to swing a 20 or a 24, depending. Okay, so again, it depends on what kind of weight that they're handling. Now, if you've seen them row a 15-pound dumbbell, they can swing a 15-pound kettlebell with no problem, or they should be able to, technically. Okay, so hopefully that answered it.
That really did, because Catherine wrote, and she was talking about rows predominantly with that question.
Gotcha.
But also, let's see, we have one here from Betty. She says, how are kettlebells different from weights, and why choose one over the other?
So that's a great question. Personally, they're another type of weight. So the weight is predominantly at the bottom of this belt, which, let's say you try to take a kettlebell, okay, and so I flip it up, right? And it's good because I've got a good grip on it, but if I drop it, it's going to come down, right? So I can do the same thing with a weight. So let me grab one of my weights. So now I'm even on my weight here, right? And I do that same maneuver here. It's not as hard to get it up here as it was with the kettlebell, okay? And it doesn't flip or move or do anything like that. So why pick one or the other? Sometimes it depends on the exercise that you're doing. Can I do all the rows that I just did with a weight? Sure, I can. I don't have to pick a kettlebell. If I'm going to do kettlebell specific things, and when I say specific things, I mean like swing squats. It's a little bit better with a kettlebell because it's a little bit more challenging. You can do it with the weights, but it's just more challenging with the kettlebell. And at the same time, look how, if you can see where the kettlebell sits and see where the weight sits, okay? I can get down there and pick that up. I can still pick this one up, but it's a little more challenging because I can't keep my back quite in a straight position. Not that that's any reason you should pick a kettlebell over a weight. It really just depends on what you're doing. So, for example, if I'm going to do a chest press, do I want kettlebells for that? Because, they're going to be here? Not really. I'd rather do them with weights because if my hands get sweaty, which they do, the kettlebells are going to flip backwards on me when I'm doing the chest press. Can I do it? Sure. Would I want to? No. Would I prefer the kettlebell? No. So there's no real reason why people choose one thing over another, but the one thing about the kettlebells is they're extremely versatile. You don't need a whole bunch of them. You could just use two, and you could get a great workout and do a whole bunch of things with just two belts. Whereas with the weights, I've got a whole rack full of weights over there, which is fun and very good for certain things, but I can always use the kettlebells too. And sometimes it's just a preference as well for people. Okay? I hope that answered it.
Yeah, that did. That's great because that kind of rolled into Stephanie's question because she was, wondering, bells look unsafe and susceptible to injury if unable to stop the momentum swinging in time. So she was wondering what the advantage was over free weights or bands as well. So obviously I can see just the simple thing of just variety to keep your client's head into it and trying to take them to a different stage for a few months. And clients want to be challenged in different ways or they walk away.
Yeah, and I mean, and there are lots of different modalities that you can utilize. You know, there's the TRX bands, there are medicine balls, there's weights, there's the kettlebells. I mean, there's body bars, there's weighted bars, there's plates. I mean, there's a ton of different things that you can utilize. It just really depends on what you feel comfortable with, and what your client has actually done. So honestly, again, if my clients never used kettlebells before, then I'm going to be a little more cautious about what I decide to do with them. It's also going to, again, matter what their general fitness is to begin with. They may be strong enough to do 2 kettlebells and do a smaller exercise rather than something like a Turkish get-up, for example. Okay, which are most people, I mean, I don't do them anymore because it actually puts too much pressure on one of my knees when I try to get up, so I don't prefer that. A lot of people will put a pad under their knee, but I'm thinking to myself, why would I do that? I could do other things. So we go back to that question of whether it's appropriate for your client. Would I get my 85-year-old lady to do Turkish get-ups? Oh, God, no. There's so many other better things for that person that they could do. Would I give her a kettlebell? I might give her some little ones. I got some little teeny ones over here that I do work with, because sometimes I'll do stuff that's just balance. So sometimes I'll be getting them to do things that are just balance, and sometimes it's fun to just switch it up and use one of the kettlebells for it. I just had a client a little while ago sitting on my wall over here with 2 kettlebells out here, and then she was doing a wall sit and then moving the kettlebells as she was doing her wall sit. Okay, so there's lots of different reasons why you could use a kettlebell, and like I said, there are some specific exercises that do much better with kettlebells, like those swings, the swing squats. But it's really more about what your client is comfortable with, what they're able to do, what you're comfortable with, and if you even have kettlebells to offer your client, because some gyms don't. Most do, but some still don't. So hopefully that answered some of that.
Absolutely. That filled in a lot of the gaps, I think. We had somebody else talking about joint stacking from Victoria.
Say it again, joint what now?
Joint stacking.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, there's a lot of pluses to a lot of equipment. But again, with kettlebells, the good thing is you can do a whole lot of things. You don't really need a lot of equipment. Okay, so I'm going to go back to demoing some exercises for you. So I'm going to use my balance board. Now again, you don't have to have something like this. My range of motion is a little bit better. That's why I use something that I can reach a little bit further with. But again, you don't necessarily have to have anything you can step on. You could always use just a stair. Like you have some steps outside that you have room to stand on. You can do that. Now this actually does move itself side to side. Okay, but what I wanted to show you on this is actually it's a row along with a Romanian deadlift. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Romanian deadlifts or RDLs. So you got your stiff leg deadlift, which is great if you can do it correctly. 99% of the time your clients can't. And really all I'm looking for is to work hamstrings glute, okay? So in a Romanian deadlift, those kettlebells or whatever you're utilizing are going to follow straight down. Now I've got just enough to go just a little bit below without allowing for my back to hunch. And then I'd stay down here, get myself a little row, or you could do an inside row here, and then I'll pull all the way back up with that Romanian, okay? So I'm going to turn myself to the side. All right, so again, I'll just go down to the platform on this. There's a little bend in the knees. We slide it straight down. And what you're looking for is somebody who doesn't have a lot of flexibility is going to start to kind of hunch because you're not going to be able to maintain it. You want them to pull the shoulder blades back. They can get a row there, or they can get a row here, or they can get both, and then pull back up in your Romanian. Okay? So that's one way to kind of combo some exercises. All right? Another way, and minus the row, to combo some exercises is by actually putting somebody in a lunge. Now, You could do a stationary lunge, or you could have them doing walking lunges or alternating lunges. I'm gonna stay stationary because I don't have the room in here to do it, but with this kettlebell, you can lunge, pass it under, stand up, pass it under, stand up, pass it under. Now the key to this one is you don't want them going really low to pass it under, okay? You want them to stay as upright as they possibly can. But if they can't pass it under, then they don't have to pass it under. They could just hold it, okay? So from here, they could hold it here and grab a press. Now again, your question might be, well, what's the difference between a dumbbell and a kettlebell there? This is evenly weighted. That's not, okay? So it does make it a little more challenging for me to press it up, okay? So it's very simple, all right?
Yeah,
You could
that's a
have
great
also
example.
somebody go from your lunge here to picking up a knee. Lunge here, and maybe they pick it up and push it. So now you've got a big fat compound exercise happening.
Nice.
Make sense?
Yeah, we have a question here from Patricia. In a group
Yeah.
exercise, how do you correct form?
So let me make sure I heard you right. With exercise, how do
In
I
a group-
correct form?
In a group exercise class is what I'm assuming. How do you correct form?
That's always a fun one. So if you've got a group of people, your job as the instructor or trainer or whatever your title is obviously to make sure everybody is safe. The best way to correct form is visually doing it yourself properly, and then obviously not calling out people per se, but saying, hey, make sure that you're keeping your chest tall, you're sitting back in your heels every time you do your squats, or whatever it is you're doing. So make sure you're making all of those cues, and then if you still really have somebody that is out of alignment or is really struggling, you can or you should, because see, doing a group exercise class, it's not your class, it's their class. So a lot of times I can't necessarily see what's going on in the back of my class, so I walk around while they're doing their exercises. I'll go back and physically correct somebody, but don't forget that you always want to ask somebody, hey, I was going to show you a little bit of a different way to do that. Is it okay if I show you and can I touch you? If there's any correction you need to make bodily, because sometimes talking to people, spatially they don't know where to put themselves, so sometimes you have to physically put them there, but you always want to make sure that you ask permission before you do that. If you can visually talk through it and they can do it without you touching them, great, because some people don't like that. But you want to make sure that you approach it with care, like, hey, you're doing a great job. Can I just show you a little bit of a different way of doing that particular thing? Just so that your knees are a little more in alignment. You don't have to say God, that's horrible. Stop doing that. Don't do that. Definitely say, hey, man, you're doing a great job. Because it might be that person's first time in the class, too. You want them to come back, and you want them to think that you're approachable as well. So you just make those minor corrections, but say, hey, you're doing a great job. Here's what I would do with this particular exercise if I were you. So fairly simple, but, just keeping it very general when you're up in front of the group, and then walking around and correcting anything personally if you need to. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that was right on.
Cool. Yeah, I've taught group exercise, so I have been a group exercise instructor since 1992. I was 14 when I started teaching. I'll be 46 this year. So I've been teaching a long time. So I have seen everything that you could see as far as people doing silly things. Now, sometimes people do exercises in a certain way because there's a joint issue. You will get better at recognizing when somebody is having a joint issue versus somebody's just not doing it correctly. Sometimes when you correct things, you can make it worse. So you have to be real careful about it, particularly when you get to your people that are older than 40, 45, 50 years old. A lot of times you're not going to have one person that's not going to have some kind of something going on. a shoulder issue, a knee issue, a back issue, a hip issue, or all of the above. Okay? So sometimes somebody is doing something because it's painful and they don't know another way to do it. And sometimes correcting something does not work. So you got to have a lot of like ideas in your pocket, because I've tried things before and they're perfectly fine to do, but they just didn't work for that person. Okay? Doesn't mean they're not a good exercise. It doesn't mean it's not a good exercise. It just didn't work for that particular person. Okay? So sometimes you have to work around that kind of stuff, but you get better as a trainer. Again, recognizing the joint problems and then how to work around them. And also, if you don't know anything about physical therapy, you've never done any yourself, you should learn a little bit about corrective or functional exercises, because honestly, corrective and functional exercises will do somebody a lot more good than doing something that looks great on TV, but is not good for that person. Okay?
Yeah. I have a couple more quick questions. I know we're
Yeah.
running out of time on this. Is
No, we are, man. We're rolling. Yeah, go ahead.
My gym has the heavy metal ones. Do you recommend plastic? That's from Catherine.
No, so the metal ones are technically, I mean, that's what I have mostly. These are normally the ones I have, and you'll see they wear, you know, this one's worn down a little bit. These are the ones that are normally out there. Here's the problem with the plastic ones, like this one here, like I think this is the not split one. There's another one somewhere that's split. But a lot of times, when you remember when we were doing the swing squats, when we were passing it and everything, and then you could also, a good warm up here is going around, just around the body, or doing like windmills around the body. You know, well, let's say that this ends up there, right? Well, I've had people break it before. So the plastic ones, they don't work as grand in case you drop it. I'm not recommending you drop it. But the metal ones are just, they last a lot longer than the plastic ones. The plastic ones I have because I train people in their home. And when you're in a bedroom, you don't want like that big heavy metal thing with you. I know it sounds weird. But when I'm at the gym, like the heavy metal ones are the ones we use. Now, we also use the ones, and I don't have one anymore. I did. But we also, most gyms, they'll give you the ones with the neoprene. See how that's worn off? Use that one a lot. But this one used to be covered in neoprene. And this is great. A lot of times you'll find these at the gym, and the reason you'll find these at the gym is because they won't scuff the floor when people put them on the floor. But the metal ones are pretty much, I mean, they're pretty much indestructible. So they're the ones I would use personally if I had a choice. Does that help?
Yeah. And
Cool.
last one I'll get you so you can get where you need to be on your presentation there.
Yeah.
With your last lunging exercise, you turned the kettlebell and held it on the bottom while lifting overhead. Are you doing that for someone who couldn't do the kettlebell swinging?
Okay, was that a question?
That's a question. That was the question.
Okay, so no. So the kettlebell swing and the lunge press are super different exercises. All right, so the kettlebell swing in itself, this is gonna be super duper cardio, super duper core, which is fine, okay? But the actual lunge itself, if you were talking about the one where I was here and I flipped the kettlebell on its end like this because it's easy. Oh, here's my broken one. I knew it was around here somewhere. It's easier for people to hold. Plus, you want to be careful where you're putting your thumbs when you're doing stuff like this, because when you're pressing up, you're going to be pressing up. You want the kettlebell to rest right there on the outside of the bicep, because it always comes here. And then if you're going to press, you're going to rotate as you actually press. Okay, so you'll be holding them here. If you've ever seen anybody do like for instance, a kettlebell squat, which again, you can do these. If these are comfortable, they'll hold them here and they'll squat, turn and press them straight up. Squat, turn and press them straight up, okay? So there's certain aesthetics to working the kettlebell. When I had it here and I was doing my lunge and I had it tipped, it's just easier to hold. That's the only reason I did it, if that makes sense. And it's a different, I mean, is this going to be some cardio? A little bit, because I'm pressing above my head. but it's still a
Yeah,
totally
it's
different
covering up
movement.
the taskbar. So isn't there like a control on the,
Got the whole screen on your video.
okay,
All right.
Do we have a question?
You wiggle your mouse at the bottom.
I think it's somebody bleeding over is asking a question to somebody.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
Icon will show up.
All right, so let me give you just a
Hang
couple
on.
other ones.
oh,
So
wait a second. All right, there are,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, I got it to where there's icons on the bottom.
yep, I hear
Yep.
somebody talking.
On the left side.
All right, so another one that you might see people do
Forms.
are
I don't know what
either
you're talking-
goblet squats or lunges. And a lot of times when you're doing a goblet squat, the hold is going to be here. But I'll be honest with you, I have a lot of clients. Now, again,
What side? The
you know,
right side?
when you've got clients
Oh,
that
wait,
are
I see a
having,
micro-
that do a lot of computer work, they might not have the best
Hang
grip
on.
factor and they might have some wrist pain. So sometimes flipping the kettlebell
See
in this
the,
position,
you know, like
with the fingers open, it's a little easier to hold it.
squares,
Same
you
thing
know,
for
that
the
you turn
goblet
the, you
squats.
start
You
the
can either
start
hold
button,
it this way
then there's a
hand
magnifying glass,
open.
then there's,
and the thumbs in the back,
hang on.
okay? Or you can hold it in the opposite way, and it's just a squat. That's all it is. It's just a weighted squat. It's that simple, okay? And of course, anytime that you're doing a squat, you always want to make sure that the back is in alignment. Now, people will go down to a 90 or slightly below with their squats. You'll see that all the time. My problem with that would be, number one, if you're going down past a 90, you may or may not be comfortable with that in form, okay? You may not be able to hold that form in a 90. If you can, great on you. A lot of times people have low back issues that will limit them from holding that 90-degree squat or getting slightly below it. The other thing is, do you want to have functional knees when you hit 50 and 60? Yes. So going below that 90 is not necessary. It's not something we have to do. But what we want to make sure that we do in our squats is that we make sure we've got our person gluing down their feet and that their chest is staying straight up and that they're sticking their butt out. And so the knees are staying in alignment as they sit straight back, okay? Now what I do, and you may have seen this in the gym, and maybe you question why somebody might do this, so I'm just gonna tell you why I do it right now. So I've got 2 weight plates. I'm gonna put these weight plates down, okay? I'm gonna put my heels on the weight plates and I'm gonna squat, okay? And then I'm gonna stand back up. The reason that you may see people do that and the reason why I do it is, number one, I have completely torn apart my right ankle. I do not have the dorsiflexion to squat properly, keep my chest up, keep my knees behind my toes, and get a decent squat. So I take some of the dorsiflexion out by standing on the weight plates. Now I have greater range of motion. So if I'm going to load myself either with kettlebells or a bar or whatever, I've got better squat quality. All right. I'm not one of those people anymore that can just plant my feet down and squat. It just doesn't work. Okay. So that's why I do it. All right. So you may have seen that before. So again, kettlebells, bars, what have you. You've got the goblet squats. You've also got the goblet lunges. So the same lunges I just did it with a press. Okay. Any more questions on your end?
Nope, it's pretty cleared up at this point.
Okay. I've got some other ones written down, but I can send them out. So I didn't do a PowerPoint because I wasn't sure what you guys would like to see, whether you just wanted to look at the exercises, ask questions, or see demos or try them out, or what you wanted to do. So I've got other ones that I can include in a handout, as well as the ones that I briefly talked about today. And then if you have any questions, feel free. Does anybody have any questions that I can answer now?
Yeah, I've got one that came in here. Can you do a goblet lunge?
I can do a goblet lunge. So again, depending on the comfort of holding this, again, if I'm going to goblet anything, the traditional manner of holding it is here. That's the normal way that you would hold for a goblet. But if that's not comfortable, I can always hold it here with the thumbs on the inside. Okay? So either way that's comfortable for you to hold it. Okay? A great one too, if you're holding it in the regular goblet style, is to do a lunge, have them press it out, and then stand back up. And this can be done in squats too, but okay? I can do it here, but it's a little more awkward to do it like that. I think if you maneuver the kettlebell and you practice a few of the ones that I was talking about where you can flip it here or you can hold it down, I think you'll find that some of them are more awkward in the down and some are easier in the up, like grip-wise. But if you haven't done a lot with kettlebells grip-wise, you probably aren't really familiar with how it would be most comfortable for you to grip them. There isn't really necessarily a right or wrong way. They will tell you there is, but honestly, when you're working with people, you want to make sure that they've got a grip that's comfortable for them and that the wrists aren't compromised. So they're not down, they're not flipped back up, they're neutral, if that makes sense.
Yeah, neutral is always the key, especially with wrists.
100%. Yep.
I know another one we have here is, Catherine was just saying balance. You know, she likes to challenge balance, especially in her group exercise classes.
Yeah, me too.
Can Carrie show us once again where thumbs go on the kettlebell?
Yeah, so if we're going to goblet, in a traditional goblet, the thumbs are always up. They're not wrapped up under the kettlebell, so you never wrap the thumbs. They're always loose and they're up top. Okay. A lot of times I'll leave my grip because you don't want a death grip on anything that you've got to hold on. Okay, right? So it's a looser grip for that kettlebell. If I'm going to do it this way, then my thumbs are going to go right about here. You just don't want to wrap them because here's the problem. What if that kettlebell flips? And it could. Okay, if it's here and it flips, easier grip, right? Try not to drop it on your foot, obviously, but you know, so.
There are pros and cons.
I know. Hopefully that helped. And then some of the grips, I mean, depending on what you're doing, you know, so if I'm going to do I love balance stuff too, Catherine. I mean, I absolutely love it. The one thing you want to make sure, particularly in a group class, if you're going to do a lot of balancing, is you want to make sure that there's a hand free so that if somebody really has poor balance, but they really want to work on their balance, then they can get next to a wall where they can kind of put a fingertip on the wall. And maybe you have them do something as simple as, I call it the tipping the bird. You know that little bird that tips, you know, into your drink? Maybe that's an old bar expression, I'm not sure. But I call it tipping the bird. So it's basically a one-legged tip that you touch down, and it takes a lot of balance, and I'm only moving at my hip. Now, I have not locked my knee out. And the big thing about this one is when I go down, you don't want to have them twist. You want them to stay straight. So once you get your balance, you take it down and you touch and you stand back up. I'll have people do that on the BOSU. I'll have even people, I've got one girl that's got an entire basement. And so she'll take 2 kettlebells and she'll tip the bird. So she'll walk and she'll tip. Now she might row with that too. So she could come down, do a tip, give me a low row, stand up. I might have her pick them up. I might have her press them. Then I'll have them bring her back down, and then she's going to go again on the other side. And see, slow and control is the main key. You see, I lost my balance just a little bit, but I did manage to recover. So, okay? So slow and control really, particularly with some of these exercises, particularly, Catherine, if you're doing balance, is huge, okay? If you're doing more endurance, like you're going to swing the bells, you're going to do whatever, then that's more endurance. And you can come up with a whole circuit of stuff to do. You know, for example, so like I said again, we might start off, you know, with, here, we're just going to pass it around. We're going to get warmed up a little bit. We'll pass around the other side. Then we might go for goblet squats, either here or in the traditional manner. We might do however many of those, okay? Then maybe we put it down, and we stand up, and we grab it again. And we put it down, We stand up and we grab it again, okay? So lots of different things you can do. You can do it all in circuits. You can do it one at a time. It really depends on what you have to work with, who you're working with. Again, is it appropriate for them to even do? Is this an appropriate exercise for them to do? You know, can they do it? Are any joints compromised, particularly the back? What are you trying to work? Is there a better way to do the exercise you're trying to do with the person that you're trying to do it with? Okay, well, a lot of trainers tend to show off. I've seen it numerous times where they try to get their client to do the craziest thing. I watched it the other night in Crunch when I was in there doing my exercises, and it's not worth it. It really isn't. Think about who you're catering to, who your client is, not the craziest thing you can come up with, but the safest thing you can come up with that will do the job, if that helps.
Yeah. That's the old classic, risk versus reward.
Absolutely.
And, who are we trying to impress? Are you bored and just want to try something? So
Exactly.
people know you on the floor. Yeah.
And I mean, you're going to see all those crazy exercises. Like I said, you know, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, they're full of these crazy people that are doing crazy things. But you as a trainer need to evaluate whether that activity is an appropriate activity. And again, like I said, a lot of exercises are not bad exercises. They're just some people they're not good for. Okay? So just because you can do something doesn't mean that Mary should do something. You know, the exact same thing. And when you're teaching in a group, it's harder because you come up with something, but you also have to have a little bit of okay, I can dive this way if I have to. You know, I teach a core bar A class at University of Richmond, and there's sometimes when I have something I want them to do, but I know there's some older ladies in that class that just can't do it. So I need to have an alternative that's going to do something very similar to what I'm trying with my younger group, but I need them to feel like they're successful because they can't do the exact same things the younger group is doing. And that's okay too. You just have to make them successful.
Yeah. Last one here I'll do for you because this could go on a while. And
Yeah,
we can
sure.
always do it more advanced when it's some other time here for everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see. Probably the overall one that hits home here with some of these other questions is, are there any common injuries, risks associated with kettlebell training?
Did you say, are there any serious risks?
Are there any common injuries, risks associated with kettlebell training?
Yeah, I mean, back injuries are always common for anything. I mean, there's always risk associated with every single thing that you do. Backs are one of them. Wrists are another one. Remember how I was just talking about keeping the wrist neutral? So if I put a 15-pound kettlebell in my hand and I flip it up, if I have it flipped in this position, you see what I'm doing? So see how bad that is for my wrist? Now let me just switch my grip to now it's a neutral. Is it comfortable on my forearm? Not really, but that's why I rest it on the bicep on the outside. Okay, so a lot of times I'll see wrist, I'll see back, you'll see shoulders as well that have a problem, and then sometimes you'll see knees again, but really if they're out of alignment, that's the biggest thing, or if they just are trying to do something that's too much. You know, like I always see, and nothing against the guys, but you guys go in and you grab a monstrous amount of weight and then try to bench press it. You know I've seen this many, many times. I teach weight training to a group of students both at a community college and then over at U of R. And I'll see them they just load that bar up and I know they can't do it. You know, there's no question. They try to lift it and then they got to go down. The best thing to do is really kind of check your ego at the door, so to speak, and make sure that you're doing something that's appropriate for your body. Same thing when you're training your clients. You need to make sure it's an appropriate exercise for your clients for whatever their goal is, okay? Your goal won't be the same as somebody else's, and your injuries and your whole makeup will be different than somebody else's. The way that your body moves biomechanically will be different than somebody else's, okay? So you got to take all those things in consideration. But like I said, common injuries, wrists are one that I see. Back is a big one. Mostly because people are out of alignment. And then knees are probably the other top one that I would say. Shoulders in there too. When you've got, anytime you're pressing anything above your head, you're not doing it correctly, you're always going to risk the shoulders. I mean, they don't sit very far on their socket. And unfortunately, as you know, you get past the age of about 40 and you start getting these little micro tears in your shoulders and in other muscles, but your shoulders in particular, because they are so versatile, and people will get injured there too. So that help?
That is perfect. That's dead on. We've got a number of people here saying, thanks, this was awesome. You know,
Right.
very helpful, all that kind of fun stuff.
Oh,
Great
good.
job, Gary. Great job. And
Great.
we're a
Great.
little bit over, and I know people got clients and things to do,
Yep.
just like you do. So
Yeah, I do. Yep.
everybody, just a real quick thing. I'll just tell you, administratively, we'll be sending out the quiz within 24 hours. So look for it at this time tomorrow, because that'll be 24 hours. And then you have till Monday at 5 o'clock to get that quiz in and get your certificate of completion. So there you go. Don't call me in 2 hours looking for it. How about that?
Don't call me either, because.
Yeah. Everybody have a great evening.
You know what?
and
If you
nice
call,
job.
hey Jay, if they call me, I'm gonna make them talk to my tween niece who talks constantly. So that's what you
I love
get
it.
if you call me, because that's what I've got on my plate for this evening.
I love it. It sounds like she's got a job with us for future calls.
I know.
All right, everybody. I appreciate you all for coming and spending the time to get better, better, best. Carrie, thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you so
Great.
much. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
All right.